Alistair Finch lived a life measured in nanoseconds and petabytes. His company, Ethel, had woven a digital web over the globe, and his own home, Finchwood Estate, was its gleaming, minimalist nexus. It was a house of glass, steel, and silent automated efficiency. Smart glass walls tinted automatically against the glare of the sun. The climate control system hummed a B-flat so low it was felt more than heard. And the air was recycled through a 7-stage filtration process that removed 99.9% of all known particulates. It was less a home and more a hermetically sealed server farm for human occupants. It was the safest, most controlled environment money could build. It was also a tomb. At its heart, in a pristine white room on the second floor, sat his sister, Ilara. She was the ghost in his perfect machine, the one variable he couldn't quantify, the one system he couldn't hack. 4 years ago, a storm, a slick road on a coastal highway, and a cruel twist of metal had orphaned them in the space of a single horrifying screech. Alistair, then a driven 24-year-old on the cusp of his first major breakthrough, had walked away with a shattered femur and a mountain of guilt that resided permanently in his chest, heavy as lead. Ilara, then only 10, had been pulled from the back seat without a single scratch, but she had left her voice, her laughter, and every shred of her childhood behind in the wreckage. Selective mutism, the first in a long line of specialists, had called it, scribbling on a notepad. A fortress of silence built brick by silent brick around a trauma too vast to articulate. Alistair, a man who believed every problem was merely an equation waiting for the right input, had attacked it with the full force of his logic and burgeoning fortune. He'd flown in the world's foremost child psychologists from Zurich and Boston. He'd hired speech therapists who used puppets and iPads, neurological experts who mapped her brain in stunning, useless 3D. They came with their gentle, modulated voices, their colorful props, and their 6-figure invoices. They spoke of exposure therapy, of cognitive behavioral frameworks, of pharmacological interventions. They left, weeks or months later, with polite, sympathetic shrugs and referrals to colleagues, who they assured him were doing fascinating work. Ilara remained a silent, porcelain doll. She ate what was placed before her, wore the clothes laid out for her, and sat for hours in her climate-controlled room, her large gray eyes watching the world from behind an unbreakable pane of glass, both literally and figuratively. Her silence became the central failure of Alistair's life, so he redoubled his efforts on the things he could control. Her diet was optimized by a nutritionist in Stockholm. Her air was purified to surgical suite standards. Her schedule, sleep, meals, tutoring, therapy, was managed by an Ethel-designed algorithm with the precision of a rocket launch. The 50 sprawling acres of Finchwood were her gilded cage, kept in a state of perpetual, joyless perfection by a rotating team of landscapers who were given GPS-guided mowers and digital schematics, not creative freedom. The grass was a uniform 2.5 inches. The hedges were perfect 90-degree angles. The flower beds were riots of color, replaced bi-weekly, but devoid of any actual life. No bees, no butterflies, just static, silent beauty. Which is why the man standing before him in his stark white office was such a jarring anomaly. "Leo," the man said, offering a hand that was calloused and ingrained with dirt, a hand that knew the earth. He was younger than the usual contractors Alistair dealt with, perhaps in his early 30s, with a face weathered by the sun and eyes the color of moss after rain. His file, which Alistair had scanned with detached curiosity, said he was ridiculously overqualified. A master's degree in horticultural science from a prestigious university. He'd even won a small but notable award for landscape architecture. Yet he had applied for the most basic gardener position on the estate. Alistair ignored the outstretched hand and slid a sleek black tablet across the vast obsidian desk that separated them. Your duties are outlined in this document. GPS zones, approved flora lists, maintenance schedules. The lawns are to be kept at a uniform 2.5 inches. The hedges are to be maintained in perfect 90-degree angles. There will be no deviation. My head of household, Mrs. Gable, will oversee your work. Any questions? Leo picked up the tablet, his thick thumb swiping across the screen with surprising dexterity. A small wry smile touched his lips. No deviation. Got it, Mr. Finch. He looked up, his gaze sweeping past Alistair to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the grounds. But if I don't mind me saying, the soil here, it's tired. It's been commanded, not nurtured. It's sterile. Alistair's jaw tightened. The implication was clear, and it struck a nerve he didn't know he had. The soil is not your concern. Your concern is aesthetics. Follow the design. Leo held his gaze for a moment longer than was comfortable. Aesthetics, he repeated, the smile never quite leaving his eyes. Understood. For the first week, Leo was a model of compliance. He moved across the lawns with a quiet, fluid diligence that even Mrs. Gable, a woman whose spine was straighter than the hedges and who viewed joy as a security risk, couldn't fault. He trimmed, he mowed, he weeded, but mostly he watched. He saw the house, a sterile marvel of technology that felt more like a museum than a home. And he saw the girl in the upstairs window, a pale face framed by dark hair, a silent observer in a silent world. Her only companion was the cold, unblinking eye of a security camera mounted just outside her window. He started small, a quiet rebellion of life against sterility. He began to talk to the plants, his voice a low, gentle murmur as he worked on the flower beds beneath her window. He spoke of the sun, of the coming rain, of the stubborn, tangled roots of a rosebush that refused to grow according to the schematic. He wasn't talking to her, not directly. He was simply filling the crushing silence with the language he knew best, the language of life, of growth, of things that push through the dirt toward the light. One morning, he hung a small set of bamboo wind chimes from the branch of an old oak tree just within her line of sight. Their sound was soft and organic, a series of hollow, woody notes that seemed to speak of ancient forests and gentle wind. It was a sound that couldn't be quantified or controlled. Mrs. Gable reported it within the hour. Mr. Finch, the new gardener has installed an unapproved auditory feature in Zone 4B. Alistair summoned Leo to his office, the sterile silence of the room feeling more oppressive than usual. The chimes. Yes, sir, Leo said, his expression open and unashamed. The wind felt lonely. Alistair felt a flicker of something, annoyance, confusion. He had no protocol for this kind of response. Remove them. Of course, sir. But he didn't, and Alistair, buried in the final frantic weeks before the Aethel OS launch, the biggest project of his career, forgot. A few days later, Leo installed a bird feeder, a simple wooden construction he'd made himself. Soon the sterile air was punctuated by the flitting of goldfinches and the cheerful, chaotic chirps of chickadees. Ilara's head, which usually faced straight forward like a sentinel, began to tilt, her gray eyes following the bird's erratic, joyful flight. It was in the far corner of the estate, a place the GPS-guided mowers were programmed to ignore, choked by ivy and forgotten by time, that Leo found his true project, a dilapidated Victorian greenhouse. Its glass was clouded with decades of grime, several panes shattered and gaping like missing teeth. The intricate ironwork was rusted a deep, angry orange. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of decay and damp earth. But amidst the debris, a single stubborn shoot of night jasmine was pushing its way through a crack in the flagstones, its leaves a defiant, vivid green. He felt a pull, a sense of deep recognition. This was the heart of the garden, the soul of the place, suffocated under layers of sterile perfection. This greenhouse was a remnant of the Finch's parents, a place of warmth, organic chaos, and love. He began to restore it. He did it after his official hours, in the long golden light of the evenings, using his own money for supplies. He reglazed the broken panes, scrubbed the clouded glass until it shone, and took a wire brush to the rusted iron frame, sanding it down to the bare metal before painting it a deep, rich forest green. He worked with a patient, loving methodology, always aware of the silent figure watching from the distant window. The greenhouse stood directly in her view. It became their shared secret world. He would hold up a seed packet to the light for her to see the bright picture of a tomato or a marigold. He would demonstrate the satisfying heft of a new trowel. He wasn't asking for a response. He was simply including her in his act of creation. One afternoon, returning to his work, he saw something on the stone patio beneath her window. It was a small porcelain teacup from a doll set, placed with deliberate care. Inside it was a single, perfectly formed white camellia blossom, likely snipped from one of the lifelessly perfect indoor plants. It was the first offering, the first message sent from the silent fortress. His heart ached with a gentle, profound joy. He took the cup and the flower and gave them the place of honor on a small wooden bench he had made inside the now gleaming greenhouse. The seasons began to turn. The project in the greenhouse became more ambitious. Leo brought in bags of soil, rich and dark and smelling of life. He started seeds in small terracotta pots, lining them up on the sun-warmed shelves in rows. He found an old chalkboard and propped it against the glass, writing the Latin names of the plants in elegant, chalky script for her to see. Lavandula, Rosmarinus, Helianthus. He was teaching her a new language, one of growth and patience, of roots and blossoms. One day he looked up and saw that the window to her room, always sealed shut, was open just a crack. She was letting the sounds and smells of the garden in. Mrs. Gable's reports to Alistair grew more frequent, her tone laced with a mix of disapproval and bewilderment. "He's turning that corner of the grounds into a jungle, Mr. Finch. It's completely off schematic, and he spends hours in that old structure. Outside his paid time, of course, but it's the principle of the thing." Alistair's patience, already worn thin by a critical bug in the Aethel OS that his best engineers couldn't solve, finally snapped. This was the ultimate loss of control. An employee, a simple gardener, was building his own rogue system on Alistair's property, a system based on chaos and dirt. He was going to fire him. He was going to have the greenhouse torn down and the ground paved over. Order would be restored. He strode out of the house, his expensive leather shoes crunching angrily on the perfectly manicured gravel path. The air was thick and heavy, the sky bruised with the promise of a storm. As he rounded the corner of the west wing, he saw them. The door to the greenhouse was open. A warm yellow light spilled out, a beacon in the gathering dusk. Inside, surrounded by the burgeoning green life he had coaxed from the tired soil, sat Elara. She was out of her room. She was sitting on the small wooden stool Leo had built for her. Leo was kneeling in the dirt, repotting a small, delicate orchid with impossibly white petals. He was explaining something, his hands moving slowly, his voice a low rumble, showing her the plant's delicate thread-like roots. Elara's face, usually so pale and still, was animated. She wasn't speaking, but her eyes were alive, full of a light Alistair hadn't seen since they were children, standing in this very spot with their mother. She reached out a hesitant finger and, gently, reverently,
touched one of the orchid's velvety petals. And then she looked up at Leo and smiled. A real, brilliant, breathtaking smile that seemed to light up the entire greenhouse. As she did, a sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a word, it was a soft, breathy hum, a single perfect note of pure, unadulterated delight. Alistair froze, his hand still gripping the handle of the glass door to his house. That sound, that tiny, insignificant hum shattered his world of logic and data. It was an outcome he had never programmed, a result that had cost him nothing, and yet was worth more than his entire empire. He wasn't looking at a disobedient employee and a broken girl. He was witnessing a miracle, a quiet, green, and growing miracle. The first drops of rain began to fall, pattering softly on the glass roof of the greenhouse, each one a small percussive note in a song he was only just beginning to hear. Alistair stood in the downpour, oblivious as the storm broke around him. He didn't fire Leo. He didn't say a word. He turned and walked back into his silent house, the sound of that hum echoing in the vast, sterile emptiness of his chest.
That night, for the first time in 4 years, Alistair didn't work. He canceled the final pre-launch meeting with a curt message that sent shock waves of panic through his company. Instead, he went to the dusty, forgotten attic and opened a heavy cedar trunk. He pulled out old photo albums. There they were, his parents, laughing, their clothes smudged with dirt, standing proudly in front of that very same greenhouse, his mother holding a bouquet of the same night jasmine that Leo had coaxed back to life. He found her gardening journal, its pages filled with her elegant script detailing her love for the messy, unpredictable process of growth. A garden isn't about control, she had written. It's about faith. He had been trying to erase the past, to build a future so perfect and controlled it would have no room for pain. He saw now that in erasing the pain, he had also erased the joy. He had been nurturing the tomb, while Leo had been nurturing the life that remained. The next morning, the air clean and sharp after the rain, he found Leo by the greenhouse. "Leo," Alistair began, his voice rough with unshed emotion. I was wrong." Leo simply looked at him, his moss-green eyes patient, waiting. "What does she need?" Alistair finally asked, the 3 most difficult words he had ever spoken. Leo gestured towards the vibrant life within the greenhouse. "She needs this, something that grows, something that doesn't demand, it just is. Silence isn't empty, Mr. Finch. It's full of potential. You just have to learn to listen to what's growing inside it." He pointed to the camellia in the teacup, now thriving in a larger pot, a new green leaf unfurling from its stem. "She was holding this out to you all along. She just needed someone to see it." Alistair looked from the flower to his sister's window, where the curtain was pulled back further than ever before. He made a decision that would redefine his world. "Your job title has changed. You're no longer the groundskeeper. You're the curator of the greenhouse. Your only duty is to bring this place, and anything else you see fit, back to life. Whatever you need, you will have it. The budget is unlimited." For the first time, he offered his hand. Leo took it, and his grip was as firm and steady as the earth itself. The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution at Finchwood. The perfectly angled hedges began to soften into gentle curves. Patches of wildflowers were allowed to erupt in the uniform lawns, attracting bees and butterflies. The symphony of bird feeders and wind chimes grew. Mrs. Gable looked perpetually scandalized, but one afternoon, Alistair saw her from his office window, stooping to gently touch the head of a sunflower, a look of conflicted wonder on her face. Alistair started to change too. He delegated the Aethel launch to his second-in-command. He started leaving the office at 5.
He started to walk the grounds, not with a tablet and a critical eye, but with his hands in his pockets. He started joining them in the greenhouse. He didn't talk much at first. He just sat on the wooden bench, breathing in the smell of damp earth and blooming things, and watching Leo and Alara work in their silent, perfect harmony. He learned the names of the plants. He learned to get dirt under his fingernails. He was learning a new language, one without words, but full of meaning. One bright, late autumn afternoon, the three of them were in the greenhouse. The air was filled with the spicy scent of chrysanthemums. Leo was showing Alara how to collect seeds from a dried sunflower head, their tiny movements precise and focused. Alistair was watching, a small, unfamiliar smile on his own face. A monarch butterfly, a brilliant orange and black straggler on its long journey south, fluttered in through the open door. It danced in the shafts of golden sunlight before coming to rest, its wings of stained glass, opening and closing on Alara's outstretched hand. She froze, her eyes wide with a profound, silent wonder. She looked at the delicate creature on her skin, then she lifted her head and looked directly at Alistair. Her smile was the one from the photograph, the one she thought was lost forever in the twisted metal on that coastal road. Slowly, as if the word itself had to push its way through 4 years of accumulated silence, she whispered. It was quiet, fragile, yet it filled the entire greenhouse, louder than any noise his perfect house could ever make. Home. A single tear traced a path down Alistair's cheek, and for the first time since the accident, it wasn't a tear of guilt. It was a tear of gratitude. The fortress had not been stormed, its doors had been gently opened from the inside, coaxed by the patient, persistent, and undeniable power of life.